Obviously, you read the title. The title being The Struggle of the Present. Now, this is going to be one that I know should resonate with a lot of people, especially if you're a person that is working hard on yourself, trying to build a better life for yourself, and of course, for your future. Now, this is going to be one that I've been thinking about, and this has probably been the one that I've been struggling with most, at least a perspective that I've been struggling with most, and that is what I would like to talk about on today's episode. If you do not know who I am, my name is Champ, and I help men build their foundation of masculinity through having conversations like this. If you do not follow me on YouTube or subscribe to me on YouTube, make sure to go and follow me on Twitch, TikTok, Rumble, and on Spotify. I'm on every single platform, and yeah, I just want to get into it, right? So I think it's something that is very, very interesting because this is something that is a little bit odd. And when I begin to explain, you'll be able to realize how odd this truly is, right? So when you begin to understand life and you begin to understand what people say about the present moment, they really suggest a needing to immerse yourself in the present moment because there's plenty of utility to be in the moment, right? Whether you're enjoying family time with some people, whether you're working, or whether you're yeah, that's pretty much what life is. Life is about spending time with people. Life is about working, right? It's usually that's most of people's lives at the end of the day. And ultimately the message that I hear all too often is you need to be in the present moment. It's better to be present so you're not focused on the future all too much. And you're not necessarily focused on the past because the past has already happened. You can't necessarily control the future, but what you can control is of course the present moment, right? And it's just something that I think I think it's a product of overthinking. I think this is what it comes down to. It's a product of overthinking. I feel like there are people who can benefit from this advice of being present. Maybe they're just too future focused, or maybe they're just focused on the past. They need to be in the present moment. And then you begin to realize that a lot of the actions and almost everything that we do in the present moment is for the future, right? So that's something that I think is interesting as well, is like you're always working towards something. You're always trying to build something for the hopes of having it in the future, or for the hopes of it being something that is relevant in the future, right? So I think that's what's most interesting is because we're sacrificing, and I think that to an extent you need to do this. You need to sacrifice the present moment to hopefully reap something better in the future, right? You need to. It's a product of delayed gratification, right? You're not necessarily, and you shouldn't be seeking this instant gratification, right? Cashing out or having the best possible time that you can have right now, whatever that looks like. It maybe doesn't make sense for you to have it right now, right? But you need to be focused with delayed gratification, earning your private victories, and eventually you'll have the satisfaction of the work that you had put in from the years of hard work, right? And I think there's a lot to be mindful of, and that's what I'm going to talk about on today's episode. So yes, you must be in the present moment, but you must think and you almost live for the future moment, right? We're told to be grateful for where you are because, or yeah, we're told to be grateful for where we are, not necessarily content because it's not where you want to be, right? So you obviously want to be, and you have goals, and you maybe have a vision for your life that you want in the future, right? You're not there right now, and that's just what it is, right? That is this sad reality that a lot of people come to is essentially this: you're not exactly all you could be, and you're not exactly doing maybe what you want to do completely, right? And that is the harsh reality that does exist. Obviously, this is something that you should be constantly working towards, and maybe you'll be able to fulfill that one day. But at the end of the day, obviously, you must be grateful because gratitude is something that is something that can never be overstated. It's something that is always one of the best things you can do, which is expressing gratitude for the things in which you have, the people in which you have in your life, and to be able to be a person that is existing in today's world, right? But with this, I find it all too often when people are in this state of gratitude, I feel like they can get caught into this web of just being content. And then they almost have they almost have too much gratitude for their current moment because they almost express too much gratitude for the current moment, for the present moment, and it almost comes off as if you're being content with where you are and what you have. And I would say that's still not necessarily what a lot of people believe or the same page that a lot of people are on, right? And I think that is interesting because I don't know. It's just a confusing. It's a confusing loop because you never know where you are because you're not where you want to be, yet you're supposed to be working towards it, right? And yeah, obviously you should be working towards it, but will you ever get it, right? Because it always seems like we're working in the present moment to hopefully have a good future. But when is it the actual time to enjoy what you've earned, what you've been working towards, right? When is it time? And I think that's interesting. So ask yourself that question. When do you think it's time? For me, my answer, I'm not too sure yet. I don't think it's now particularly, but at the end of the day, I don't. It's just confusing. I'll get into a little bit more of what I've structured for today's episode. Right. All right. The future reality that exists. Right. Let's just if you want if I could take you into a vision right now. Let's just say there's a future that exists where you don't have what you need and you don't have what you want. Right. You've not done enough in the present moment, so therefore, in this vision of the future, you are living in a hell like state because, like I had mentioned, you don't have what you want or what you need. And that is what I believe to be hell on earth. This vision that you create for yourself that is hell, right? You not necessarily getting the things that you should have worked for, right? And obviously, you should be doing everything in your power to be making sure that's a vision that does not exist. That's something that's not a reality that you will exist within in the future moment, right? But in the same breath, people are going to be talking about the present, like I had mentioned, right? And you must enjoy the present moment because the present is all you have, right? The present moment is all you have. The present moment is all we have. You watching this, whatever time it is, whatever day it is, this is all that you have at the end of the day, right? So in that same breath, you want to enjoy the time that you have, right? So you want to have a good time, but not too good of a time because you still must be and you still must remain future focused. And I feel like with that circumstance, I feel like you can be all too consumed on one side, right? You could be either too overly focused on the present or too overly focused on the future. And when you're in the present, too focused on the future, you're not even in the present, and you're not in the future. You're in this weird in between state. And same thing, yeah. Essentially, you're in this weird state of limbo where you're like almost in a pending state, but at the same time, you have nothing. You have nothing that you have nothing. Essentially nothing, right? So, like I said, you can understand that this is a complex topic even for me because I'm trying to discuss and I'm trying to process it just as everyone is trying to process this at the same time. And I feel like with needing to be future focused and like I said, not necessarily having the best time that you can have because you must be future focused, you get caught up in life and we forget about what are the things that are actually worth living for, right? And and I think that's something that's interesting because it's like how can you truly appreciate what you have when you're so when you always want more? And like I said, obviously I'm going back to this shade of gratitude, but at the same time it's like when is it really going to be the time where you can actually enjoy the fruits of your labor, right? Does that even exist? And that's the thing that I think is interesting is like I feel like everybody's working towards, or at least this is what I think and this is what I observe, is people are trying their best to work towards a time in which they can truly enjoy the fruits of their labor. But I don't necessarily believe that. I would say probably 99% of people pretty much never get there. They're either a waste of what they could have been, or they are all of what they could have been, or what they are all of what they could be, but they're not enjoying the fruits of their labor, right? So I think that's interesting. So with that being said, it kind of makes me think of where where I will end up and where I want to be and what that actually means and what that entails and the consequences of that action. So obviously that's a whole lot to be thinking about, but I think it's like it's almost like this, right? I'll give you an example, right? Um, the example is this. If you're too obsessed with, or if you're too grateful for the situation that you're in, obviously there's plenty of things to be grateful for. But I'm just saying for the inconvenience that your life is in right now, right? Maybe you're doing, or maybe you have a job, or maybe you're doing something you don't want to necessarily do, or maybe you feel like you're meant for more than what you're doing right now, right? And for you to be fully grateful and fully immersed in the present moment, as so many people suggest, you are almost in this state of submission to the current circumstance, right? And if you want anything better for your life, it's probably not best to be in this state that is almost a submission of the current circumstance, right? And the reason I say that, and I can only speak for myself, because I feel like when I'm in these specific moments when I'm doing things I don't necessarily want to do, as far as things that don't necessarily contribute to the grand scheme of life in general, right? Maybe that is working a job that I don't really care for, right? I feel like it is truly a submission of the current circumstance in a way where it feels like a death or a surrendering of your mind. And that is why it feels the most uncomfortable for me to do long term, or yeah, or having that long term view of needing to work, right? Just as it is always so familiarized and so talked about in today's society, right? Is almost being in these submissions of the current circumstance, right? And I feel like gratitude in itself is it obviously can and probably does mean more than that, but I feel like at the same time, a lot of these people who are grateful for what they have are also content with what they have and truly not necessarily, at least through their actions, express that they're wanting of more than what they have right now. And I feel like in order for you to be able to really strive for what you want in the future, you must be not content of what you have right now. You can't be the most content of what, and that sounds like it's obvious, but then like I had mentioned earlier, when is it the time where you actually enjoy the fruits of your labor? When do you actually enjoy the work that you've put in? And more importantly, like I said, if you are in that position where you're content with where you are, how are you ever meant to get to the next spot? And I feel like that is with I think the perspective that I have right now is an advantage for the future, but a complete disadvantage for the present moment. I find myself ruining the present moment very, very often because I'm so caught up in what I could be, right? I get so caught up in this in this life that I have created for myself in the future, right? Working towards knowing the things in which I want and hopefully building upon those in the present moment, right? And now, obviously, that is a very, very good long-term strategy, is obviously planning for the future. But if you plan too far ahead, you're neglecting all of what is right now. And I think that is something that is very, very painful for you to realize, because you could be missing out on some of what is great right now. Now, obviously, there's things that could be better, but at the same time, if you're in this state of constantly wanting more and expecting it to be given to you in the future, you can kind of see that you're setting yourself up for it to always be that way, where you're constantly always wanting more. You're constantly wanting to go into the future, and you're constantly not giving enough focus and emphasis and respect when it comes to the present moment. So I do believe that me being in that state does give me an advantage, and having that mindset does give me an advantage for the future. But in the same breath, it also is a very, very big disadvantage for the present moment, right? Because I'm not content, and obviously not being content can be good, but at the same time, maybe you're not expressing as much gratitude as you should be for the current moment. And yeah, I just hopefully you understand where I'm coming from, and maybe you see the same perspective, or maybe you have the same perspective. And I want you to let me know in the comments what you think about this, right? Whether you're in the live comment section or whether you're watching this, what do you think about some of these topics of conversation when it comes to the present moment and the future? And this is really what I want to get into, right? So I'm 23 right now, right? I will look back in about 15 to 20 years thinking this, when I was 23, when I was 18, when I was 25, when I was 28, those were the golden years, right? These are the good times that we will reminisce on. I remember when I did episode 233 of the Life of Champ podcast talking about the present moment and where I'm going to be and what I want to do and not being content. Of course, I'm going to reminisce. And I think and when we all really think about these things and when we observe our elders, we begin to see that they reminisce with a smile on their face of these good times that were in the past, right? So like I mentioned, these are the good times that we will reminisce on. And we would almost, and this would go for people in the past, and of course I'm sure I'm going to feel this way in the future, right? We would almost do anything to be able to relive these moments of the past, right? There are moments that I've had a few years ago that I would love to relive again, and I'm sure it's going to be the same for today's time, right? If that makes any sense. This present moment will eventually be the past. And when I'm in the future, which is now the present, I'm going to be looking back on the past, which is the present today, saying, those were the good days. And I think that's interesting because the golden years don't feel golden. And what does that even really mean? What is, like I said, I don't even understand that. I can't even begin to comprehend that because it's something that is, it defies so much. And like I said, maybe I shouldn't even be thinking about this, but at the end of the day, I think that's interesting, right? If these are the times that I will reminisce on, if these are the days in which I will say these are the golden years, and I will look on and I will want to relive these things, but they don't feel golden in the current moment, that's got to mean something. You never want to neglect the beauty of the things that are happening now because of how beautiful they truly can be in the future. And I find myself all too often caught in this web of being in that circumstance where I can't really, I don't want to be content. I don't want to be completely okay with where I am, but if I can't necessarily begin to really enjoy or be present or to be grateful for the present moment, then will I ever be truly grateful in the present moment, even when I do have the opportunity to potentially reap the benefit of the work that I put in the past. So I think that's interesting, and I'll get into a little bit more of these things, but I'm in this essentially maybe you relate with this, but I can speak for myself, and I can only speak for myself, of course. I'm in this weird state of limbo where I'm not necessarily in the future because obviously I'm in the present. But since I'm in the present, I'm not necessarily in the present because I'm focused on the future. And I'm definitely not in the past because there's no way I could be in the past. So it's like I don't know, like it's just like maybe it's overthinking, right? And one thing I want to mention that I think is interesting, right? It's I'm almost overthinking in the present moment and underthinking about the present moment, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to say that one more time, right? I feel as if I'm overthinking in the present moment, but I'm underthinking about the present moment that exists right now, which is all that we have, which is all that we can control, which is all that we're given at this current point in time, because obviously the future isn't promised. It's not necessarily going to be given to us for sure, but what is the solution? What do you guys think the solution is? Maybe it's a perspective change. Maybe it's a removal of something. Maybe it's an implementation of something. But I'm not too sure what it is. I'm still trying to figure it out, just as probably you are as well. I'm going to read some of these comments and then I'll get back into it. Yes, sir. I feel you on that, though. Whenever I try to talk to women, I see the future with them sometimes, and it doesn't make sense because I don't even know her and she doesn't even know me. So, with that saying, we have to enjoy what's in the moment because anything can be given or taken away from you at any moment, in any moment. Yes, and I do agree with that. Of course, like I said, it's complicated It's a complex subject. I'll say that at the very least. Um, Obviously, I'm saying it, and we can process this. We can process these things very, very simply. But when it comes down to it, these things are much more complex when put into practice. When actually processed, it just becomes different. So yeah, like I said, what's the solution? And then like I said, I ask another one of these questions. If you're doing everything for the future and you're living for the future, are you ever truly in the present? Is the present actually ever truly valued properly for what it is? And and like I said, I'll bring back this topic up again, right? If these are the golden years and they don't feel golden, but I know I will remember them as the golden years. But then I just have the question of, why do I feel like I'm still lacking something? As I begin to live out these years that I will reminisce on in one point in time, why do they not feel so special? Why do they not feel golden? Why do they feel like I'm still lacking something? And why do I feel like I will get that in the future? Because if I don't have it now, and I definitely did work for it to have it today, but I don't have it, there's almost no guarantee that I will ever have it ever. You see what I'm saying? So it's like you run into this cycle. Obviously, this is somewhat of a cycle, right? You begin to see how one thing correlates to another, and this thing that doesn't make any sense makes sense, but it still doesn't make sense, and that is the state that I'm in right now in my life. I just feel like I want to take advantage of the present moment by working towards the future, building a better future for me and my family. But in the same breath, I want to enjoy the current moment because I understand that the current moment is all that we have, and tomorrow isn't promised. So we wait for the future to arrive, but it already has. And that's the thing that's interesting. We wait for this future moment, but this is also a future moment that we once waited for, that we once expected would make us feel different than the present moment. But we find out we're still feeling the same types of ways, right? Where we know that we aren't all that we could be, we aren't where we want to be, and we are working towards where we would like to be. And that is life. That is the present moment. But at the same time, it's like, if that's always the present moment, when are you actually going to reap the benefits of what you've worked so hard for? And I heard Chris Williamson say this quote, and I'm going to say it because I feel like it needs to be repeated, and maybe this can give some perspective. I don't know necessarily where he got it from. He probably got it from somebody else, but he mentioned this concept of the ironic tragedy of life, right? Life has to be lived forward, but only makes sense in reverse. And I feel like this has something to do with it. Because we have to live these moments, because these moments create the past. And when we reminisce on the past, that's when it actually makes sense. But living in the present moment and understanding that there is a future, it still has you puzzled of what can be and what will be of the future. But like I mentioned, life must be lived forward, but only is only ever going to make sense when looking back. So yeah, obviously there's a lot in this. I think this is depthful, but I'm gonna read some more of these comments and then I'll go ahead and continue on. Yes, indeed, very complex, and that's why I'm learning every step of the way on this channel. I appreciate it, KJ. I would say no, because you don't get to enjoy the journey you're on because you're so worried about the destination instead of focusing on everyday moments, whether it's good or bad. That's why I believe everything you do today will be reflected in the future. Say if you're eating junk every day and lacking in the gym, then in the future you will be fat. However, if you eat healthy, hit the gym, and focus on what you have to do daily, it will come in the future, and There's no waiting. Do everything now. Take action now. Don't wait later. There is never a perfect time to do anything. And that is the thing that I find interesting, right? It's like all of those things that you mentioned are right, and they're right in certain perspectives, but they're also wrong in certain perspectives. And I think that's just so interesting, right? He is right. There is never a perfect time to do anything, so you must do it now, because the future isn't promised, like I had mentioned, and like KJ had mentioned. But at the same time, it's almost like this, right? One of these things that we do on a daily basis is work out. You work out to have healthy lifestyle, maybe to live longer, maybe to look better, but at the end of the day, you're still going to go ahead and work. And what are you working towards? Like I feel like you must understand the grand scheme of everything. And obviously it's hard to, internalize all of that, because, and of course I'm not saying that it is even possible, but you could try your best. But it's hard to be mindful of the end when you're in it, right? Obviously, people say it's not the destination, it's the journey. But I don't even think there is a destination, and I think that's where I feel like that's where everybody gets it wrong. There is no destination. It is only a journey. You're not going anywhere because you are already there. Or are you there? You see what I'm saying? It's just like, but you're definitely there because you're in the present moment, but you're not where you want to be. So are you actually there? But the question is, will you ever be where you want? And the answer is hopefully. Hopefully you'll put in the work in the present moment. Hopefully what you're doing makes sense now, and hopefully it will make sense later. And then I have this list of questions, and I want to ask you guys this, and of course I probably have already asked a few along the way, but obviously you learn stuff and you build stuff that you will enjoy in theory in the future, right? But when will you enjoy what you worked for? How will you enjoy what you worked for? Will you enjoy what you've worked for? And what's the proper way to enjoy what you've already worked for? Without taking away from the future and without taking away the present, kind of. And I just feel with this, there's all too many questions. There's so many questions in mind, and unfortunately not enough answers. And that is the conclusion that I've came to with today, right? I feel like you must be mindful of the journey, and the journey is today. The journey is right now. The journey isn't tomorrow, but it is potentially. See, this is what I'm saying. It's just it almost never ends. This game is, even though it does end, it's a never-ending game. When you're in the midst of the game, it's never ending. But when you're dead, obviously, then it's for sure over. But you're the only one that doesn't know, pretty much. So, the game is always going. And you enjoy the present too much, and you're taking advantage in the worst way of the present moment. Right? I know that for sure. Because you're not future focused, and you're not going to have a better future because of that. But if you're only working towards the future, and that's all that you can think about, then you're taking away the beauty of the present moment. And it can truly never be fully enjoyed because you're so caught up in what could be and what will be, hopefully. So, with that being said, I think it does come back down to the message of be present. Because obviously presence is all we have, at least that's what they tell us. One day, you'll be in the future, but the future will be the present, and the present of today will be the past. And that is what I know for damn sure, right? So be present, work towards the future, try somewhat to enjoy the present. Know what doing too much. How do I want to explain this? Know what it specifically looks like when you're not valuing the future enough, and know exactly what it looks like when you're not valuing the present enough. If you can figure those things out, I think you'll have a way better grasp of how to handle this life complexity that I have discussed today. Obviously, it is complex, and like I said, of course, I said all these things simply, but to be able to execute and to be able to internalize all these things probably takes a lot of time. And of course, like I had mentioned, right, I don't believe people say the destination is the journey, or the journey is the destination, or whatever the hell they said, or whatever, right? But you understand what I'm talking about. But essentially, there is just the journey. There is never going to be a destination. You'll never fully arrive to where you want, because there's always more to do. And once you achieve goals, guess what? You now have achieved the goals, and that means you need to create some more goals, and you're always going to remain hopefully not stagnant, because if you're stagnant, then you're dying. So, and that's the thing that I think is interesting, right? If you enjoy the present too much, you're dying. And if you're not emphasizing, if you're overly emphasizing the future, then you're not living in the present. And that's all I have to say for today. This was episode 233 of the Life of a Champ podcast, talking about the tragedy of the present. I'm going to call it the tragedy. I'm pretty sure I titled it something else, but you understand what I'm trying to say. But that is pretty much all I have to say for today's episode. If you enjoyed today's episode, I appreciate it for watching to the end. And tap in with the next podcast on Thursday. I'll leave you guys off with the podcast motto. Fellas out here, man, we don't just work around here, man. We outwork. So make sure you outwork these motherfuckers, because you know that I am, and you know that everyone else is around me. And of course, we're doing it in the present moment, while also still finding a way to enjoy the present moment. To give the present moment the respect, but also, for sure, give a lot more respect to the future. That's all I have to say. Like I said, tap in with the next podcast on Thursday. Make sure you follow me on Twitch, TikTok, Rumble, and on Spotify at Life of a Champ Podcast. And it's just like that, man. I'll work these motherfuckers next podcast on Thursday, and be present, man. Y'all have a good night.